Hello, I'm Colette Robbins, and this is Sophie Kahn, and we are the co-hosts of File Exchange, a YouTube channel interview series dedicated to elevating the narratives of contemporary artists using 3D software. We started this channel in mid-2021 after Sophie and I observed that there was a void in the discourse about artists using 3D software. As hybrid digital analog sculptors, we also noticed a lack of substantive virtual studio visits. As a result, we built this channel to provide a context and space for a literal and conceptual exchange of files. Each episode features a different artist, curator, or writer who has a focus on 3D art. This channel allows you to be a fly on the wall as we share philosophies, tools, and tips revolving around these 21st century tools in art. This week is our 9th episode, and our guest today is WANG Yefeng. Oh my God, screwed it up already. We got to pause that. All right. So this week is our 9th episode, and our guest today is WANG Yefeng. I have more recently met Frank, but Sophie has known Frank for quite a while, right, Sophie?
Yeah, since grad school, so 2013 or so. So yeah, I'll welcome Frank. Frank is an experimental animator and interdisciplinary artist based in Providence, Rhode Island and New York, currently joining us from hotel quarantine in the middle of the night. So thank you for that in Shanghai.
Of course.
He is an assistant professor at Rhode Island College, recent artist in residence at ISCP in Bushwick. And we met through our mutual teacher and mentor, Claudia Hart, at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, where Frank was a year ahead of studying art and technology studies. So yeah, welcome. We're excited to talk to you today.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Yes, thank you, Frank.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you want to start.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay. Okay. Can you see that?
Yes, we can see your
There we
depth.
go.
Yeah.
Okay. And yeah, I'm just trying to. Yeah, just give me 1 second. I'm trying to put your face back
Take your time.
with
No
the
problem.
Zoom thing.
I know it's always a little tough.
Here we go. Yeah. So hi everyone. I'm Frank Wang Yefeng, and I was originally born in China. So I came to the United States in 2007, right after my BFA studies. That was in sculpture, and pretty much since then, you know, I have been an international traveler, and you know, for the past decade, pretty much my life pattern has been just like a constant lingering between the United States and China. You know, United States being my place of work now, you know, and China is obviously the place of my kinship. You know, I think both places are still very important to my creativity. But you know, something I found interesting is it's hard to claim either place as a home anymore. And this is kind of related to my current research. That's why I, you know, in my recent works, I got really into this idea of in-betweenness. You know, I'm sure we can talk more about it while we are going through some of the works. Yeah, just this sense of in-betweenness is connected to, you know, some of my research is related to affect theory and, you know, nomadism studies. And which I found it interesting is it has never been, you know, like a lot of postmodernism thinkers talked about that in their books and writings, but it has never been a term that was turned into an ism, you know.
Yeah.
Although it has been, yeah, you know. So I think something attracted me was, you know, when I first came to the United States and started my nomadic life. Of course, you know, a lot of uncertainties accompanied. And at first, you know, I tend to look at it as a negative thing because, you know, with my rational mind, right? You never know what's going to happen in the next second. or what you should be expecting. But more and more, I just start looking at it in a positive way, and realizing that's pretty much going to be a permanent space where I operate in, and that's basically where you're going to be establishing your subjectivity, right? So I think more and more I want to look at it as a potential positive atmosphere, to generate new thoughts and new things can happen within it. Of course, with a lot of curiosities as well. So I guess I can go to, I have a lot of works here. I probably won't have enough time to show all of them. But maybe
the more the better.
Yeah.
Well, that can take the whole afternoon, but but I guess I can go to some of the more recent ones.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, can you see the picture?
Yes, yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, so that's, I'm showing this work first for the reason, it was actually created last year in the year of the huge pandemic.
Yeah.
And I was on my sabbatical last year. So I went to Berlin, and the original plan was to have a short-term artistic residency in Berlin. And as soon as I got there, the pandemic happened. So there was a long time lockdown.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh my God.
So I got stuck there eventually for 7 months, and for a quite long period of time. Yeah, so for quite a long period of time, the residency place provide me with a housing, and in Berlin, Sophie, you have been to Berlin, right? You probably know it. And a lot of their studios is like a work and living situation. Yeah. So you have your studio on one side, and in the same room, you have a small bed you can sleep.
Yeah.
So for quite a long time, I've been staying in that small place and couldn't go out,
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've never been to Berlin before that. So
oh no, it's not the best way to see it under those circumstances. Yeah,
it became a pretty interesting situation though, so you got really familiar with the space, with that small accommodation, but its surroundings is utterly foreign to you still. I don't know anything about the surroundings. So this project I made is entitled The House of the Solitary. And I think at that time, it was really related to some of the things I was reading at the time. I think I was looking at Harman's object-oriented ontology. That was like one of the main inspiration. So I kind of like turned my attention to these objects, kind of like stuck together with me in a small space. And realizing that they're pretty much the same as me, stuck in this in betweenness.
They were quarantined along with you.
Right.
Yeah.
And then there were like several times of flight cancellation. So eventually I just turned a lot of these objects and kind of like transformed them into characters, and they appear in my animations. I think I first wrote some poems for them. There were like 7 or 8 objects in total.
So does your work start with writing? Because I know that was something I found really interesting just about reading more about you, was just how writing is a part of your practice as well. Is that how the ideas start? Is like you start with writing and then it expands into a language, like an image-based language, and then an installation, or?
Yeah, well, writing has been pretty important. I mean, an important part is, of course, related to the research. And I found for most of the time, for some odd reason, I've been writing in English. And I don't know why I do that. It's maybe kind of like that weird, it's like an uncanny fluency of a foreign language, right? And I found sometimes when I'm writing in English, it makes it even more poetic, because you would make the word choices that a native speaker want to use.
Right. It gives like a little more kind of leeway, I guess. There's almost that, like, I don't want to say like a beginner's mind, but there's kind of, I don't know, like a naivete that lets you associate more. Yeah, I'm not bilingual, so I can only kind of try and imagine that experience. Yeah.
Well, different languages approach meaning and kind of grammar differently, and like just kind of how a word is composed, or even how it's read from right to left or left to right, and like, you know, how it's viewed or composed. So then when you translate that in that kind of mindset into another language, you definitely, it does feel like when you're approaching art and you're taking one dissonant element and kind of connecting it with another. So it's like you're making these connections with the words and meaning that maybe are slightly different based on the context and your native language. And I think that's really fascinating. I mean, I almost became bilingual when I studied abroad in France. And I remember one of the things, I was there for about 5 months and I had studied French for a while. And the coolest part was dreaming in French. And like, I still, I speak French like a baby. Like, I mean, I sound like a toddler when I try to speak French, but like, it's still even, you know, it still kind of comes through that feeling of like a little bit of lost in translation, but then as you get to know it more and more, what unfolds. So I think that's really interesting that you are
and also
playing
what
with
we
that.
can and I guess another part is also what we can remember through language. You know, usually in my works, language are they appear together with images. And in some of the languages texts you're seeing in this animation, I made them hard to read on purpose. You know, kind of like go back to that idea of the uncanny fluency of a foreign language, which is actually a term I stole from Homi Bhabha. And language is also a device of retention as well. You know, as soon as when language was invented, you can record history. You know, so I found that was pretty interesting too. You know, which I found actually art also has a part of its functionality is retention as well. You know, like the image is often associated to the world we are living in. Yeah, but what you're seeing here, so this animation, when it's shown, usually it's shown as a video installation and a set of 7 different animations. So I guess I can fast forward a little bit. So this is just a screening version of it. I just kind of like piled all of the separate channels together for a screening experience. Like this short one here is just a really short poem I wrote, and it's a pun. Some of the chapters are related to the social incidents happened at a time. You know, there were a lot of turmoils at that time politically. You know, and the pandemic. So this one, and of course, at that time I could.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah, and at that time, of course, I could only receive all the information from the internet. So technology was an important part of everything that was happening at the time and our perception of the reality. But that short poem right there just is a pun, just says American spirit is going to get me killed.
Yeah. This video is like, it's sort of like cute and hilarious and unnerving and uncanny all at once. Like the thought that all of these everyday objects are actually so unstable, the more you think about that, the more kind of frightening that becomes to me. You know, like they could just explode and pop at any moment, and that the whole fabric of reality around you is made of something that's dissolving. So I mean, I think that's a really, you know, the advantage of 3D too, in that you can kind of, every material is endlessly mutable, right? You know, is endlessly like translatable, and you can transform something into something else. Like I remember, and like talking about identity and hybridity is like flashing me back to undergrad, because I wrote my undergrad art history thesis on airports and on like similar, you know, like liminality and like in between identities. And I wrote about, you know, it's a really different situation, but being in between Australia and America and the UK, like I have 3 passports and similarly don't know where is home. I don't really feel at home in any of those places. And so much of the writing around identity too was really around airports, was really kind of privileged, and it was all about unencumbered movement. And it's like, well, okay, your movement is unencumbered through an airport, but like not everybody, you know. It's a like flashback for art history. But
it's really, it's also just, I really like this combination of like intentionally making it hard to understand the language and like,
Mm.
but also this clarity of textures and place, sense of place. And then also the kind of fleshiness of and the organic kind of blowing up and deflating of things, and the
Yeah.
slow movement, the kind of the turntable movement is a really interesting combination of elements that are really dissonant, and but then yet are somehow, they start to form this kind of loose poetic story as you watch them unfold. Um, and
Yeah, I
I
mean,
yeah,
well, you know, I kind of call these characters and quote unquote and texts of characters of in-betweeners and the texts of in-betweeners as well, because these texts were sculpted in VR, in a VR environment.
Interesting. I was about to ask how you had created
voxels.
Yeah.
Yeah, just had my Oculus Rift on, you know, and sculpted
medium.
them. Right. Yeah, I use
Yeah.
Medium, and I was amazed when I found that, you know, app on my Oculus Rift, and it just immediately downloaded it, you know, and I immediately start writing text in them in the software instead of sculpting any objects.
I remember the thing that first drew me to 3D, because I came from a photography background, and then it was kind of 03, 04 that I decided I wanted to learn modeling, but it was that sense that you take something in the real world and like transmute it, you know, like you can take a building and then turn it into glass and have it light behave completely differently through it. So the idea of like the identity of things in 3D to fluctuate or being endlessly like permeable and changeable was really interesting. So it's interesting to think about that intersecting with, you know, hybridity and like identity and place and things not being what they seem or things transforming into something else. Yeah, that's really
absolutely. Yeah, I agree. And you know, just this sense of a constant transformation as well. Like sometimes the software just wants to do its own thing too, you know, and sometimes it's just not that just not that predictable, you know. And I think as creators, I'd like to allow that unpredictability to happen, and be ready to work with its problems. I actually use a lot of, you know, I think some of these images looks pretty representational, although conceptually I question the idea of representation. But for my storytelling, you know, I found it's hard to use really abstract images or a sequence of numbers that we, you know, and you know, so I think it's a good middle ground for me to tell my
because
stories.
you're abstracting text, you're abstracting a image of like an iconic image of like a bus, like something very known to all of us. So you are representing some sort of imagery, but you're then playing with it and exploring with it. And I think that's something I talk about with my own work, is that I feel like a collaborator with the software. Like I'm, you know, bringing my hand, my intuition, and something that the software doesn't have, and then playing with what its potential possibilities are, or what its limitations are, and exploring within that. That's to me what's so interesting about using software right now. And it seems like I really like the idea of you being, because I've used Medium before in VR, and it's very, it feels,
I want to like fire it up now. I'm gonna
fire it up. No, but I think getting in, if people watching haven't used it, it's so amazing because it's like a spray can. It's like spray paint, and you like feel like a child. Like you feel like you're just playing, and so you're bringing not only the hand, but that playful sensibility, that like wonderment of like a child playing with a tool for the first time into the text. So I think that's one of the pieces of software you use. You obviously bring it into some sort of traditional 3D package, like Blender, or what do you use then? What are your other pieces of software?
I use Maya's primarily.
Okay.
Yeah, and ZBrush, of course, you know, so it's just these classic industrial standard softwares, but try to use them other widely. Try not to make boring commercial works.
Yeah.
You know? And I agree with what Colette said. You know, who said kids doodling is not art? And sometimes they can be a lot more imaginative than than adults. Like, you know, they look at the world totally differently. Just on our way became grown-ups, we sort of lost that kind of imagination.
My kids turn out, like my 6-year-old turns out 50 drawings in a day. You know, I'm like, your creativity is amazing. I wish that I like could do 50 drawings in a day. She's just like a, you know, one after another. Yeah.
But, you know, going back to the digital software then too is how can we allow that to happen? And just that ambivalent identity attracts me to, like, these texts sculpted in media. They can be 3D and they can be both 2D and 3D, and they can be both graphic and sculptural. You know, if you wish, you can output it with 3D printing and they become real, you know, rigid sculptures. But you can also put them in a 3D software, render them with an animation, do all sorts of weird things to them. And I like that, I think.
Yeah, I'm curious too about how you got into 3D software or any software. When did you start using software in your work? How did it start entering into your practice and become important for your work?
Well, you know, as Sophie said, and we both had the same mentor, Claudia Hart, and she has been a big influence on a lot of us, I'm sure, you know. But since I studied sculpture in my undergraduate, my BFA in Shanghai, and you know, my generation, the art education in Shanghai was, in China in general, was still pretty traditional, you know, with a lot of like Russian representational works with a hint of like French Impressionism. So we learned to sculpt like your face in 3 hours, for example. Right, in a very realistic way. But secretly, I have been just working on video works, animations by myself. You know, I like that. I had nobody to show my works to at a time. You know, I think that was one of the one of the reasons drove me to go overseas to try to study somewhere else, and, you know, try to experiment with other ways of making art. So I started my graduate studies. Then, you know, the program, I was in a program of art and technology, but of course also I was very much in proximity with film, video, new media, and animation department. I was doing a lot of classes there. I was teaching some classes there after graduation.
That's the nice thing about SAIC is you can come in through one department. I did the same. I came in through art and technology and then barely did a class in art and technology, like because I taught myself that stuff between undergrad and grad, so I didn't need to learn or, you know, so I did sculpture at SAIC mostly. I did mold making and casting and ceramics, so it's a nice program in that it lets you be very flexible.
Yeah, that's good. You know, I really like that flexibility. And I tried something like I tried to write some code, do some coding classes, processing. You know, and after one semester, I immediately know that's not something I can do. Or I like doing.
I feel like you have to. I feel like you have to with everything. A lot of people tell me I have no patience for 3D modeling, but then they have patience for like something else that I have no patience for. It's like, which problems do you want to have? I feel like is always
right. Right.
Which
and
challenges do you want to have, and which things?
Right. It's just a different sense of time too. I think, you know, technology obviously gives you a different sense of time. I mean, like you said, it's a problem of the time. You want to stretch it and wait for the rendering, or do you rather have everything just happen in a real time pace?
It's also a different language too. It's like I've been thinking about this a lot recently. Like I have trouble engaging with a lot of work that's been made in the kind of NFT space right now, and, you know, certain other legacies of digital art. And I don't come out of any background with any interest in abstraction, you know, like that, to me, that was an entirely different legacy in the art world and digital abstraction, and very worthy. I have no issue at all, you know, more power to you if that is the kind of legacy as an artist that you're coming out of, but that wasn't me, you know. I was coming out of photography, and so I'm like, digital art that's not figurative or representative, I just struggle to find like a foothold in, you know. And so I think something like processing, I mean, maybe I'm misunderstanding processing, but I think that there's like an aesthetic that's associated with art that comes with code that's like conceptually really interesting and, you know, aesthetically rewarding, but it's just not the way that my own mind works and wants to engage. So I think maybe that's where actually a lot of the artists that Colette and I have kind of spoken to throughout our show have, you know, our channel, have had in common, is that none of us are really engaging in that digital abstraction, in that language.
Yeah, and it's also related to, I guess it's also related to our influence as well. Like, you know, the way I was educated, or, you know, I was really attracted to animations and films. I love watching films. You know, and it's also about storytelling with these media too. You know, I think it's a good way to engage viewers. You know, so it works, I guess.
With the moving image, yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's really interesting for me, Frank, to see you presenting in this format versus going into your website, for example, because your website almost feels intentionally difficult to like interact with because of all the imagery and like you know, it's hard to rest because your eyes are like wanting to go everywhere. But actually, if you step in and you see each one of your pieces, they are very like, they rest on these moments, and they have, for me, I'm getting a very like, there's something meditative about kind of just watching this very playful kind of language kind of rotating, and I have this, there's an intimacy to it. Whereas when you look at and I like that your website is almost like it's an extension of your practice, and it has like, well, it's like a zoomed out universe of something you're creating, and then each piece is like a vignette. So that's interesting to me because it relates. But I'd love to see like what one of your files looks like in Maya or ZBrush, whichever software you're playing with right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me open, I can try to find a scene and open it, just a random one. But I appreciate your comment on the difference, kind of like a different aesthetic on my website and in my actual works. You know, at first I feel like it was unconscious, and I didn't know I did that. But now maybe, you know, I guess I just want to be fair to the viewers. And my way of being fair to the viewers is to challenge them and to kind of like, you know, provide them with the same experience, you know, of my personal experience. Because like when you go to my website and try to read all the text, they are pretty hard to read, but that's very much my experience when I'm reading English. There is a distance. And the works, the meditative part of the works is just very much what I feel like when during the creative process, and maybe just what I feel in life in general. Like when you're taking a plane, which I enjoy and I love driving. You know, wherever I can go, if I can drive, I will drive. I will not take a plane.
Really?
Yeah, I love road trip. You know, just again that interstitial space. To put you in and to pull you away from the sense of normality, and allow you to maybe see things other widely. And that's the experience very much the pandemic provided with us, I think.
Definitely. And I think I really feel like I read your website the way it was unconsciously coming out of you, which I'm happy that happened. I mean, that's pretty cool because I mean, but not all websites are an extension of somebody's practice. They're sometimes just a frame or a format, and that's fine. There's not, I mean, I feel like there's no one template, and everybody should explore what the medium of a website is for them, and their practice. Oh, Maya. We're in Maya.
Yeah. So I'm going to load a scene, just a random
Nice.
one, something I'm currently working on.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
So you looks like you use a lot of like physics simulations too in your work. Is that like in your
Right.
animations? Are you doing like inflate deformers and that kind of thing?
Right.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and you know, and again, I do that because I like that sort of leave be attitude, just to see what the program can do. You know, and this is kind of an example of that. You know, so all these tentacles, I try to set up a system with character with skeleton binding and you know, a bunch of physics things happening in the scene. So you know, when it started simulating, I don't know exactly how the tentacles is going to move. And sometimes it's going to create some sort of glitches. So this is just the current project I'm working on called related to the research of the genealogy of yellow parallelism that Sophie mentioned at the very beginning of the session.
Yeah, and I was lucky enough to see these in Frank's studio at ISC. So there's a accompanying 3D print. Beautiful.
ISCP.
I would love to see, can you zoom into the file so I can see a little like closer to the texture?
Absolutely. So this is just at the beginning of the simulation. I have various scenes of this project. You know, at a certain point, they all go really crazy.
Okay.
You know, the texture is just it's normal. I'm sure you guys are both really good at it. You know.
Still learning. Always.
We all are.
Always. Never stops.
Yeah. But I started doing some. I started really delving into the X-Gen, you know, hair system.
Oh, that never used that. That looks great.
I haven't used that either. So you're using just like in Maya, there's like a hair simulator.
Right. Yeah. It's a constant. The learning curve is like a really, again, it constantly grows. You know, there's always a lot of new things you can learn. But at the same time, I guess I have to tell myself to be really careful not to get overly attracted by all these you know,
all the like bells and whistles that the software has. No, I know, it's fun though. Oh, sorry.
I was gonna say, so you built this from scratch? You like kind of modeled this and then applied you mapped it and textured it and then rigged it? Is that kind of how you, or did you rig it?
No, actually, I didn't build it from scratch. I used stock models, downloaded models from website like Turbo Squid, you know,
and of course, a squid from Turbo Squid,
right? Which is a really good website, but also very problematic too, you know. Yeah, well, first of all, you know, technical speaking, you probably all realized you have to spend a lot of time fixing the model that you downloaded.
I use open source scans, so I have to do a lot of that.
Yeah, but my way of working for this project was, you know, I had a particular idea on my mind, and I was searching for these objects and kind of like, you know, just to put different things together to make this character. And for this project, since it's related to the research of yellow parallelism, which is related to my overall, you know, kind of like study of Sinophone studies. And I was searching for you know, I want to put this octopus body. We can talk about its story later. With like a Asian, just like a random Asian face head. So I went to Turbo Squid and I was searching for like a Chinese head, Asian head, and just, you won't believe how many really racism heads appeared.
Yeah, I mean, it was the comment I was going to make was that I know that like Claudia has talked about making 3D. And in the early days in 3D, like the insane kind of sexism and misogyny that was in that imagery, that she would talk about how she would go to like SIGGRAPH, and the tech demo for this 3D program was a rendering of like a woman from like a Hooters waitress with a bikini riding a motorcycle, you know, like,
right.
So this made me think of the sort of the Disney, like the racist and homophobic and, you know, like the Disney villains that, and it's like, it's when you're using this same medium as the animators and video game designers, and you're engaging with like people who are using this tool for something like that's really awful, you know, like
Mhm.
how are you engaging with it and kind of using that same tool to resist, which is a really interesting
Mhm.
question, I think. Because yeah, the thread is
Absolutely.
gross. Some of it is really gross.
Well, it's yeah, you're absolutely right. And people have been talking about if all of the racist stuff, are they still here, or sexist stuff, are they still here? I mean, has these situations been improving? Of course, but
Yeah.
is it enough? Definitely not. And you still see a lot of problems, and in a way, they actually they happen in much subtler ways nowadays. Like the kind of dualist really puts different categories in, um, and the I guess binary way of thinking. Think about movies, right? Zack Snyder's movie 300. You
Ugh.
know, you can find a lot of examples, but
Yeah.
they happen in much subtler ways now. I guess that's what I want to say.
Yeah.
But still very
Still there, and
ubiquitous.
harder to kind of ferret out maybe, but necessary.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to find another
Definitely.
scene, which
Well, I think it
is
happens
probably
very
more.
overtly too, especially with COVID and like the terrible like branding that our former president
Mhm,
was giving, and like that was something that for the Asian
mhm,
Americans and Asian communities in the United States. I mean, it's just a big problem. So
mhm,
yeah, no, I think it's still overt in some circles and then
mhm,
very subtle in others. But I think it's interesting to think about racism and language, and then the
mhm,
visual language that you're doing research on, in addition to the writing that you're doing. And just like, because so much of a racism beyond being tone is about the meaning of words and the meaning of context and then privilege, obviously. And
mhm, mhm,
so I haven't done a search in turbo squid for a certain ethnicity before. So I had no idea that was going. I do know because I teach DAS 3D. I use that for my figurative students to teach them, just basics about 3D modeling. And if you search that website, you're going to find a whole lot of awfulness.
Oh, yeah. It
mhm,
surprised
It's
me.
terrifying. But
mhm.
it's a very powerful piece of software, but it's got a lot of kind of very intense things. You kind of see the underbelly of the internet when you go to the DAS website.
Mhm.
Imagine.
Right.
um,
And just this awareness of, when you are working with this software and work with its problematic parts, and
Yeah.
you have to be conscious with it, and you always have to approach it with critical thinking, I guess, right? Use it
Yeah.
critically.
Yeah. No, I think
Um,
that's really important, and doesn't always happen either even in the contemporary art context. So
mhm.
yeah. So you said you wanted to talk a little more about the story of this character in particular. Is that right?
Sure. Yeah. Do you want me to, should I share my slideshow back maybe for
Yeah,
yeah.
this?
yeah.
Okay, cool. So I'm gonna fast forward. That's that's another weird piece.
And
That was great too.
Yeah. So this project I also started developing this summer when I was doing the ISCP artist in residency.
Mhm.
And first I was actually
That in
invited by.
my intro. I'll fix it. Sorry. I called it ISC. I'll fix that in the
Oh yeah.
sorry about that.
Just don't let them hear that.
Fix it. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. So. Yeah, so I started developing this work because first I was deadline gets things done, right? I was invited by Denver Digerati, and they have this wonderful program called Night Lights Denver, and every year they invited a certain numbers of artists, and they commissioned the artists to do this public projection mapping installation in Denver, in their theater district, I believe.
Mhm.
So I was thinking about, because once again, I had several chances to work in public space with my, digital media works. And I really appreciate these, opportunities because that really got me thinking how to how can you really transform a public space to public sphere and build new kind of connectivities? I mean, because there's obviously a difference between public space and public sphere, right? If you think about public space as just a location or a place, and a public sphere is somewhere, I guess, more like an atmosphere for connectivity. So for this project in Denver, I wanted to propose them something more provocative. And at the time, I was doing my researches, related to Sinophone studies and basically, the position of Chinese immigrants, or just in a larger picture, the Asiatic communities in America or in the West, basically situated outside of the, Chinese geoproper, right?
Yeah.
Their home countries.
Yeah.
So so I discovered the whole project initialized from the discovery of this really weird racial symbol, which is a vicious octopus. Usually has a racial signifier in yellow color, became a racial signifier to these people. I think this symbol was first coined by this British writer, Sax Rohmer, written in 1913, and he has a famous series of books called infamous series of books called the Dr. Fu Manchu, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And in one of the books, that's where I found this symbol. It was first coined, a vicious octopus, trying to stretch its tentacles, ready to take over, and and the symbol was used to describe Chinese people. So since it's a public project in Denver, and I really want to kind of like put forth this history, this sort of hidden history, and to try at the same time, in a playful way or in a whimsical way, try to deconstruct a little bit. I think I'm still trying to look for a effective way to successfully deconstruct it. But this is a rendering of how it's projected on the building in Denver. This is I think I have some videos too. So that's the character being projected on the building. It just looks like that. My hope was to make it look rather, with an attitude of indifference or whimsical than dangerous.
Right.
Definitely looks playful.
Yeah, I mean, the little face is very sweet. It's like a
I mean, it's playful. It's like it looks like, there's some sort of powerful kind of, I mean, the fact that it has all of these like heads like attached to the tentacles, like it has these abilities potentially, like superpowers or something.
Or just hard to define, like we don't really have to give it a clear definition, and again, using this leave be attitude, and it just wants to, it just wants to do its thing, right? Levitating there, and right. So here are just some reference. This is a great book written edited by, co-edited, I think, by John Chen, also known as Jack Chen. He co-edited with Dylan Yeats, and John Chen was actually the founder of the Museum of Chinese in America in New York.
Yeah,
it's a great archive, and a lot of pictures were found in that book. So it really allowed me to actually learn that. Obviously there has been a surging hate against Asian communities, probably partially triggered by the pandemic. It just really got me thinking, kind of like, this ambivalent life or ambivalent situation of this group of people, which I'm a part of, actually. Again, in a great sense of in-betweenness, right? But I guess, I want to sort of talk about this, like the community also has to think about how we can act from here and now, and try to establish our subjectivities from where we are at, instead of asking other people to ask instead of asking someone else to solve the problem for you. And this kind of stuff needs training, And I'm just really trying to use any possible platforms to kind of like advocate this or tell this.
Yeah. And then it's interesting too to think about, what is an artist's role and what is an artist's responsibility in kind of rewriting imagery and representation. I think that's always, like what I find really interesting, just kind of dragging my mind back to kind of art historical studies, is thinking about the art that's been made under really repressive regimes where things couldn't be done overtly, and like the amazing power that art has to say things kind of sideways and subtly and subversively. I think that that's like almost a unique option that's available to us as artists. So yeah.
Right. And also make it accessible to the public as well, like to put it forth and for people to contemplate.
Yeah, and I think it's like the way you're doing it, and I think what you said is just that this piece just wants to do its own thing. I thought that was a really powerful, because it's like it's giving, you're remixing all of these stereotypes, but also again playing with whimsy and curiosity. So you're not just placing them directly and then you're allowing them to be their own thing, but still talk about those things. And I think it's interesting to see that you've got this 3D printed piece, then you have animations. I'm curious to hear more about how you chose these specific installations on the both pieces on this. This is really powerful.
Right, and both pieces they both have a lot of kind of like secret stories or messages that are embedded in them, again, related to what I found in documents and images and archives, so this structure on the right-hand side of this video installation that you are seeing here, where first of all, there are two screens, and on the bottom is this showcase of this weird character just levitating there. And on the top is a new video I sort of developed it. It has quite a lot of, how should I say that? Wrong simulations from the computer system, So as a result, I want to make it look like a sequence of failed scientific simulations of a weird animal, which is often being alienated. And the structure on the back, this wooden structure, well, first, it's functional because it supports two videos. But at the same time, it's sort of like a metaphorical way to show. Well, you're familiar with the Transcontinental Railway, right? I think was firstly built they started building it in 1860s, maybe 1869 maybe, or from 1865 to 1869. I don't have the exact dates, but around that era. At the time, Chinese immigrants' labor was a huge contribution to that construction, to the make of it, but not often talked about it. And not long after, actually, America had this anti-Chinese act. So I found some images in the archives, and just try to make that structure looks like the Transcontinental Railway.
Okay, right.
And the structure of just that structure.
Right. Like the rails and the word for blanking on the name, but the things that go across the rails.
Which is not often a story, which is not a message or a thing that I will always tell all the viewers.
Right.
But
this is a deep dive.
Look.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
why I enjoy talking to you guys, right?
Yeah, it's fun to go deeper into certain pieces. I mean, this is just, and this piece in particular is a piece Sophie and I have talked about on our own calls and just looked at, because it wasn't something I could find on your website, and Sophie really wanted to show it to me. And so it's really nice to see just all of its iterations. And you also mentioned, I think this is interesting. I always find it interesting because every artist has a different way of dealing with these questions, but like how for you, you're saying that once you start a project, it's like it continues and it lives with you, and you add other things or create other iterations of it. Do projects ever stop for you, or are they just always open-ended and ready to kind of be explored? And how do you know when you're finished with a piece for installation? Like when does it say it's ready for you, ready to be shown?
Well, deadline gets things done, I guess.
That's usually my answer too. Yeah. But that's such a good question. That's a great question.
Right. So there will be different space and different circumstances or different venues you interact with, and these two pictures were taken in the residency during this summer. So it was a good place for me to actually visually see these works. But when you're writing a proposal to a new space, then it will be different, right? You will alter it. It's hard to say when a overall body of work is finished. They can be ongoing for a couple of years, but I guess when I feel the work is finished, it's just kind of like get really tired of it, and really needs to dedicate my time to a new body of work.
Yeah.
Which is still often related to the previous research. Yeah. So it's hard to say. I don't think it's and I'd like to see how it grows.
No, I think that sums it up for you. I mean, I think everybody has a different response to that question, because it's like each artist has different, we don't even realize it, but we all create rules for ourselves. We create rules and guidelines, and then we break those and change them and add new rules or remove. But I think understanding what those rules are the only way that you can then know how to break them and how to move and push yourself, like,
absolutely. Yeah. But something I do realize is at the very beginning of the research or the creative process, I often try to make things perfect or try to make them look right. But then when it keeps developing, like the second edition or the third, version of it, I try to start doing wrong things and try to just make everything look wrong on purpose. And I don't think I've been doing enough, actually. I want to make more things wrong.
That's so funny. I'm the opposite. I start with like I just, everything comes out of me, and then as time goes on, I edit.
You refine it and polish it. I mean,
I'm like just yes.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. No, I'm just so you can see the video while we are talking.
Yes. I think the idea of like using a 3D tool against the grain is a really interesting one. I think there's ways that all three of us are doing that in our respective practices, and kind of questioning some of the assumptions behind the design of the tools and pushing it, making it do something it's not really supposed to do. And then also that like allowing in that weirdness and that kind of uncanniness. I actually think a lot about like letting ugliness into my work. I really battle with that. And when I let it happen and let it breathe, I think the work is actually a lot stronger and more kind of alive. But I'm a perfectionist, so I'm always like trying to like censor that, in my own. So, but yeah, I think that that's like allowing that glitch, allowing that strangeness is a really powerful thing, especially in these tools that have this overwhelming aesthetic, like it's so easy to churn out something that looks like the software wants it to look, Yeah.
Right.
This is great too. I think we might
love seeing the zoomed in. I love seeing the zoomed in head with that like headpiece. I've been researching all of these like ceremonial headpieces or like dancer headpieces, and that just, I love that.
That was actually a metaphor of the Statue of Liberty.
I also I've been playing with that imagery too. It's a very powerful.
And I choose that on purpose because is this video currently is still in process. I think I'll probably make a bunch of changes to it. But at the time I encountered a piece. It's called an open letter. It's an open letter written in during the time of Anti-Chinese Act. In America. and it was written by a Chinese intellectual at the time, and it's called an open letter, like an Asian version of the statue of the Asian view
Okay.
of the Statue of Liberty, and you know, because the act was actually made precisely in the same year when, you know, New York tried to do fundraising to fund the pedestal of the Statue of Liberty.
Right. So those histories,
You know, as a symbol of
parallel.
freedom. So there are some symbols of freedom there in this work,
Right. I
like this
see
torch and
now. Yeah. And the book.
so they just
I also
all
love
these,
the massive feet, talking about just like how we feel, and like those are the things we feel the world with, and how they're exaggerated in this, you know, fun way, and also how that the arms look like they're just like vestigial, like flopping around.
right, just do their thing, you know, driven by some mysterious force in the universe, and you know, and it's obviously anthropomorphic, but it's not really a human.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be understood by our brain.
Yeah.
Do you ever do any works that are like the final format is like a 2D non-moving, like a render, like a printed render, or a drawing, or paint? Like, do you ever, does that ever, or is it always a moving image or a physical? Just curious.
Yeah, totally. So this can be a good example, actually.
Oh, perfect. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. I found it's a little bit problematic for me to, you know, to capture like a stew, you know, animation stew, and turn it into like a work of art. You know, so I always have to. Well, this is a project actually also commissioned by Royal College of Art and Gaswork London at the time, and at first they wanted to make a physical show in Gasworks London, but they couldn't, again, because of the second wave of the pandemic was hitting London pretty hard at the time. You know, so as a result, the curatorial team decided to take over a bunch of public billboards outdoors in London, and that's what I did. You know, this story, it's animation actually, and the animation was inspired by a discursive road trip in Europe last year that I did. You know, it's a pretty weird story. I mean, it's very discursive. You know, I was just driving kind of like in countryside, try to just to get away from like the main highways, big chain gas stations, you know. But then accidentally I just encountered this mannequin, bird-shaped mannequin.
Right. So that was the original. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so this is the original mannequin. It's like it's life size.
What a crazy mannequin.
Strange, yeah.
Yeah, but you know, it has this interesting pose waving at you constantly, and at the same time constantly being neglected. All the passing vehicles just drove by really fast and nobody really stopped. And so I found it's interesting. You know, there's some interesting intersection between this character and the stories that I want to tell. So I wrote a poem again for it. And and kind of like, you know, turn it into like this levitating ghost in my animation, and very much a metaphor of the other in our society, like who perceives everything but constantly being neglected. So that's kind of like a part of the purpose of these billboards, you know. So this levitating character wants to slow you down, you know, and there are QR codes printed on the billboard. So the passerbys can actually scan it and view the animation online. So at least I hope that action will just to slow you down a little bit, you know. So that's one example of my still images.
Nice.
But often it's again related to the situation or the venue or the context, really.
Yeah. So That's really, it's great. We've been able to see this range of your work throughout the hour. And I'd also love to know what you have going on right now. I know you teach full time, but if there's any things or pieces of art you want to promote or events, definitely do that now.
Yeah, sure. I appreciate that opportunity. So, well, one of the reason why I had to go back to China is first seeing family, and also I'm participating in this great show called OCAT Biennial. It's I think the current one is the 9th one. So it will be a pretty fun show. I probably
awesome.
won't make it. Yeah, I probably won't make it to the opening, but I'll be going there for a panel discussion and see the show in person. Try to.
Great. Yeah, no, congratulations. Send us the link.
Congratulations.
Yeah, video comments.
Yeah.
See it.
Amazing. Yeah. And Sophie and I are in the Wrong Biennale right now in a virtual show
Me
called
too.
Nice. Okay, so we need to put all of those links.
Put all the links. Yeah.
So ours is Sight Becomes Sound, a symphony for the metaverse. So it's a sound and like 3D sculpture kind of pairing, and it's a vertical space with Synthesis Gallery and Matt Gant. He designed it, and Sophie and I both have sculptures in it, and then I put my mom's sound, her music associated with our kind of area, very kind of ephemeral. Yeah,
I'll check it out.
Yeah,
isn't Synthesis Gallery based in Berlin actually?
Yes.
Yeah. I'll put you in touch with George.
Yeah, he's great.
Nice. Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely
Congratulations to you too.
Thank you. So what is your space in the Wrong Biennale? Which booth do you have?
So I think I choose because there are a bunch of options you can opt in, right? I choose the book, of course, the publication. And there is like 2 web pages where you can upload your video, and it's the section. What are I forgot the exact names for these sections.
I don't
these
know.
pavilions. Right, yeah. They all have like really bizarre but interesting names.
I know, that's why I just will put the links, just follow up with the links, and then we'll put those in there. I know ours has a specific link to the Hubs page. So I will put that in. We're in a surreal beach scene within
like a sculpture.
Thinking about doing I was thinking about doing the e-commerce thing too, maybe.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll have to kind of touch base about that. I'm curious about how that goes. Well, thank you so much, Frank, for joining us and for sharing so much about your practice and your works. And we both wanted to really kind of get that deeper dive and just kind of see what you were doing. So we really appreciate that. And just for all of our viewers out there, we'd love to hear from you about any other suggestions for artists using 3D tools or writers or curators in the comments, and subscribe if you like it. And until the next couple of weeks. So we're going to sign off and say goodbye for now.
Thank you so much. It's really nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.